All right, we are live. We did it, Ryan, and we did not break anything getting here.
Well, that's good. That's a good start.
It's good. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We are going live in many places right now. So say hello to us. If you are here with us, make sure that you give StreamYard access to see your name as well. If you don't, then I'll just see Facebook user and we won't be able to see your name. And then we won't know who we're talking to. So if you are commenting, make sure that I think there's like a link up there that you press, and then it just gives StreamYard access to see your name. So welcome in, everyone. I am Lindsay Padillo. I'm our marketing coach here at Figure MSP. And I have the Ryan O'Hara, who is our VP of Member Services. Welcome. Hello, Ryan.
How's it going? Yeah, little change of tag from last week, huh? We had some changes.
I know, exciting changes though. I'm excited. Are you excited?
I am. Yep. It's been a fun week. Hit the ground running, and still have a full calendar. So.
Oh, that never goes away. By the way.
Nope.
You only get more things on the calendar.
Right. But no, it's been good. It's been nice to have my focus dedicated on one thing for a while, and it's still in my wheelhouse. So just a little bit different perspective on it.
I know. Okay, well, for those of you that have been here with us, you know that each week we've been coming live on Wednesdays. So about 10 weeks ago now, Chris and I actually started out. We came in, we talked about marketing for 4 weeks, and then we had Cindy, our sales trainer. She and Chris came in and they went through their sales process. And you guys got a treat with Cindy. Cindy did awesome during her series. And now for the past 2 weeks, we've had Ryan, and we'll have Ryan this week and next week. So Ryan's going to be taking the veil back on our stack, on the top secret stack that we recommend or not recommend.
The mythical stack. Yeah.
Yes. Everyone wants to know the stack.
Mm-hmm.
So today's webinar, today's training, it's going to be super good. I'm actually really excited for today's training as well. I think that this is something that I need to be more informed on as the marketing coach. So, I'll let you take it away, Ryan, and you can go ahead and share your slides with us. Those of you that are watching, I highly recommend staying engaged. Talk to us. Let us know what questions you have. We are here to support you. So these trainings on Wednesday are literally so informative, so helpful. So make sure you're engaging. Make sure you're talking to us. And then hopefully we're going to see you in a few months in Nashville for our live event. So I just put the link down here if you want to check that out. Did we release that publicly? Who our speaker is, Ryan?
We did, yes, that
okay.
did public.
So we just unveiled who our keynote speaker is for our live event, which is Chris Voss, the negotiation king. I don't know if he calls himself that or not, but I'm excited for this one. So we're going to get to sharpen up our negotiation skills, which is everything in business, from leading a team to sales to marketing to everything in between. And then, of course, we're going to have full day for cybersecurity risk assessments. You're going to have marketing trainings with myself. And then, of course, you've got sales with Chris. We're going to have Ryan there, and the whole team will be there. So you guys go check out our live event. We hope to see you in Nashville.
Yep. So, and if you're not familiar with Chris Voss, I definitely recommend you take a look. He's got a great book about negotiations that can be used and really applied in any sales scenario. So definitely check that out. As Lindsay mentioned, the previous 4-week stints with Lindsay and with Cindy, those are in the guide section on our Facebook page, our IT MSP and business owners page. So definitely go check those out. The stack is something I know that a lot of people are interested in, but unless you have the sales and marketing in place to do that, you don't have anybody to put this stack towards. So make sure that you go back and look at those if you haven't seen those already.
Yeah, and actually, speaking about those guide section, I could not find the guide section in our own Facebook group. So in case anyone is wondering, I'm going to show you all where it is on your mobile app because it's not super easy to find if you don't know.
I've never looked for it in the mobile app, so yeah.
Yeah, let me just show you all. All right, so in your app, here we are. There's these 3 little lines, like the little hamburger lines. Go right there. And then you'll see guides. And then voila, all of our trainings from the past like 10 weeks are in there. So if you guys need to go back through marketing or sales trainings, there you go.
Definitely recommend. Good stuff. Lindsay, on the very bottom, if you want to take my slides and add them to the stream, perfect. There we go. All right, well, let's get rolling here. So, yep, it's week 3. The last 2 weeks, we talked about understanding the risk, the cybersecurity risk assessment stack. So the pieces that you use to do that first piece of the puzzle, the cybersecurity risk assessment, so that you can show your prospects and your existing clients what their risk is, which is super, super important so that they can make the best business decision for how they want to move forward, right? We talk a lot about sales. The way I look at sales is you don't have to call yourself a salesperson. I know some people look at that as kind of a dirty word. The way I look at it is just educate. Our job is to educate the customers, the prospects on what their risk is so that they can make the best business decision possible. And without that information, they typically are making that decision based on nothing but, their thoughts and feelings, the opinions of the people that they know. And we all know that small business owners don't talk about things like cybersecurity incidents. It's not information that they share. They're usually embarrassed to talk about it. So most business owners will claim they don't know anybody who's been hacked. And I would bet that they probably do. They probably know more than one. They're just not talking about it. Week 2, last week, we talked about standardizing your stack and how to streamline operations to scale. Basically, the philosophy of the stack. So the way to look at it when you're curating your stack, how to build it, the fact that there is no perfect stack. So it's very important to remember that. I mean, that's one of the things that we get on the Facebook group a lot. What is the 7-figure stack? There really isn't a quote unquote 7-figure stack. We try and preach and teach to follow a cybersecurity framework as your standard for the security piece of it. Today we're going to talk about the support pieces, which is a little bit more straightforward and probably something more people are in tune with, because a lot of the MSPs out there at the very minimum have been doing a support-based stack for several years. So we're going to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of that. And then next week we've got the moment you've all been waiting for, the lifting of the curtain for the cybersecurity stack itself. So I know that's the one a lot of people have a lot of questions out. Whenever there's a post that starts talking about $300 plus per seat, that's where it typically goes to is, what are you offering for that? What is that? And then all in cybersecurity is kind of the answer. This is going to expand on that. And it will take us a full hour to go through that, which is why it's such a difficult question to address and answer in the confines of those Facebook comments. So be sure you come in and tune in next week for that piece of it. But like I said, today we're going to talk about the support stack. The way I look at it, and I even put it this way when I'm doing my sales proposals for prospects. Or I guess I got to start talking in the past tense now, right?
I know.
It's going to take a member while to get used to.
Can we share this, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. So those of you that don't know, so Ryan has been a member community as a client.
It's been a little over 4 years.
4 years. I bet that was like Chris was in diapers then, basically. So Ryan's actually been a client, had his own MSP many years. And
until last week.
Up until last week. And then, so Ryan, when did you start actually sales coaching and helping out with the support?
January of last year. So it was a little
so that was a few months before I came in. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that.
Yep.
So I came in March. So you had just started out with your sales coaching.
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay, so Ryan is literally full-time with us now. So you have sold your MSP.
Yep.
You have, that's the dream, right? It's like either to retire from it very successfully or to sell it at a price that makes you very happy. So I'm super excited to have you on full time. So if anyone's wondering why we had the title change and what we keep talking about, it's because Ryan O'Hara is officially one of us now. So there we go.
Yes. So when I had my MSP, a week ago and before,
a week ago,
I did talk about during my sales proposals that these days the IT is the easy part of what we offer. So I think it's interesting. That's the stuff we've been doing for years. And not to say that it's easy per se, but when you look at it from a security perspective, keeping people's computers running fine and fast is one thing. Keeping them safe and secure is really where it starts to get a little bit more difficult. There's a lot more tools that are involved, which we're going to go through next week. But there's also the human element. It's always the biggest weakest link in anything. It's real easy to show somebody your value when you're fixing their computer, making it run faster. It's a little bit harder for them to understand and comprehend when you're talking about security, because in a lot of those cases, that type of situation is telling them that they can't do something, or that they have to jump through a hoop, or things like that. And there's always a good reason for it. So it's all in how you present it. But when you boil it down, to me, the IT support these days is really the easy part. But, and there's always a but, it's the part that your customers are more familiar with. So it's really kind of the stuff that you're going to get judged and graded on as you're doing this work for them. So it's very important still that we need to be very good at this. Even though we know that security is our first priority, and we need to know this, this is where the customers are going to look. They're never going to judge you on, hey, they don't think about the fact that you're keeping them safe, right? They're definitely going to judge you if something bad happens from a security perspective. But if everything's going well from a security perspective, they don't really, it doesn't move the needle for them. The support piece, how quickly you get back to them, how often their computers have issues, these are the things that they're typically judging you on. So that's why I titled this one Managing Your Clients' Expectations, because when it comes to what we offer, it's the support piece that is typically their point of view from the expectation standpoint.
It's like the tip of the iceberg. It's what they see. It's what's front facing, but they don't see everything else that goes behind that's under the surface.
It's the stuff that they're more concerned about at the end of the day. And it's part of it's because that's what they're more familiar with. The other part is just because that's what's right in front of them. That's their day to day. And that kind of goes into, the support and security have opposing philosophies. So that makes it difficult when you're providing both services. And if you start looking at larger organizations, like a really well organized larger organization is typically going to have, a CTO handling the IT side of things, and then a CISO handling the security side of things. They're different departments, right? Because they have those differing philosophies. When you look at it from that perspective, the support side is all about making things go. It's keeping things running, keeping things efficient, making things move. The security side is really all about managing risk. And so those things can kind of, butt heads from time to time. We run into that a lot. And so even though we're talking about the support stack and talking about the fact that this is what your clients are typically going to grade you on, you also need to keep in mind what your responsibilities are. So when it's still important when you're looking at those opposing philosophies, that security needs to be the boss at the end of the day. So when you're evaluating these security or these support tickets, the security needs to still be the focus. So you have to be aware that when these tickets come in, you can't necessarily say yes to everything that the end user is pulling in or requesting. A good example of this, we had somebody before. They had a new bookkeeper. So they called and they put in a ticket and they said, I need to give my bookkeeper full access to my entire user profile on my computer. And we're like, no, they don't need all of that. They don't need access to everything that's in your profile. And then so we have to talk to them, and it becomes one of those situations of, well, no, we can't do that, but here's what we can do. And then you go back and you start educating them again on why these things aren't good ideas. And another really good example that we've run into quite a bit is we typically block access to removable media by default. So like USB flash drives, right? The main reason for that is because you typically know where those have been. A lot of people take a flash drive that's on their family computer, their kid plays and downloads free games from who knows where, plug it into their work computer. So you can have a threat that can travel from that device, and then you're basically letting it was a complaint that I want to be able to use this. I need to be able to use this this USB device, and then having to explain to them why. So we had one not too long ago, which was a perfect example of this. Unfortunately, it was a customer whose mother had passed away, and she had a flash drive that her mother had, and they wanted to see what files were on it, see if there's any photos and things like that. The only computer that she had access to was her work machine, and talking not only did it was it an unknown device that they had no idea like what it had been plugged into before, but it was like a cheap knockoff type device. So like when it was plugged into the system and our software blocked it, it didn't even have a serial number on it. So like it didn't register anything. So we had to go through and explain that, and then ultimately leave the choice up to her, to where we could either have you sign a document that shows you accept the risk, or your best bet would be to find another computer that doesn't contain sensitive data on it that you want to look at. So you always have to evaluate all of these support requests through the lens of security, because security needs to be the thing that comes first.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about the tools themselves. And so when we're talking about the tools, we're going to go through kind of like the categories primarily of the tools that you want to make sure that you have within your support set. I'm going to talk a little bit about some examples and recommendations of some of the tools that are out there, but especially on the support end of things, there's a lot of different options for these, and it's just important that you find the tools that fit for you. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about some of these, but like RMMs, for example, in my opinion, most of them are kind of on an even slate these days. So like as far as features go, so if you're more comfortable with this one, that's not a wrong answer. If somebody else swears by this one, but you like this one better, just use what works for your business. But there's going to be a couple things that we're going to talk about specifically with the first one that we want you to really consider and be aware of. So the first one we're going to talk about is the PSA tool. So probably the big players in this arena are going to be ConnectWise Manage, Autotask. Your PSA is really going to be kind of your central organization for your business. So it's the tool that's going to handle all your ticketing, contain and hold all of your customer information. A lot of them are going to hold your financial information as well. So it's kind of the brains of the operation. Because of all of the information that it holds, they tend to be a real big pain in the butt to change down the road if you want to retain any of that historical information. A lot of them, in fact, I don't know off the top of my head any of them that are real good at exporting data, so that way you can import it someplace else. And then because of that, there's not a whole lot of them out there that really have a really good import option as well. Just because they're so robust, there's so much information that's contained in there. It's just really difficult to map all of those to take them from one platform to another. So this is one that I really encourage people to look at really, really hard and consider before deciding on one, because you may get 5 years down the road and want to change, and it's going to be a nightmare for you to do that. So especially if you're just starting out, if you're a newer MSP, think about where you're going to be in 5 years. Think about where you want to be, not where you are right now. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of more budget-friendly tools out there. But when you boil it down, if you're charging properly, this shouldn't be that big of a deal. It shouldn't be a cost prohibitive type option. I mean, there are tools out there that bundle things in that include the RMM in them, that charge you based on the number of endpoints. Some of them charge you by the number of techs. So some of them tend to be a little bit more affordable in the front part of what you're doing in the early days. But again, think about where you want to be, because switching these things is a nightmare. So you want to think about the big picture as well when you're kind of evaluating these. So, ticketing is obviously something that you want, and it's important, but they pretty much all do that. So don't worry about that. I think the other kind of pushback that you get from people, I'm not going to look at ConnectWise because I don't need all of that yet. And I get that. You probably won't be using a lot of the features that are part of that. But again, think about where you're going to be. Use the features that you need right now, but that way you've got everything that you're going to need down the road there and ready for you to go. One of the big things I try and the examples with that I try and impress upon people, especially some of the more budget friendly ones right now, they do all the basics great. So the ticketing and things like that. What it comes down to, what I want you to really think about, is kind of how you're going to manage your business down the road. So when you're doing things, when your business grows and matures, you're not going to be as the business owner as concerned with the tickets. That stuff's all going to be your technicians are handling all of that. So you still want it to be able to do that stuff, but you're not as concerned with that. You're concerned with the day-to-day running of the business type functions. So does your PSA easily give you access to really critical KPIs that are going to help you in making decisions on your business? So one of the things that we get a lot with new members coming into the 7-figure program is they're really focused on top line revenue, right? So how much money I'm making per customer. Most of them really clear on what they're getting for that. But they're not looking at the bottom line revenue. So they're not looking at, and they don't have easy access to the data that tells them, here's what I'm charging my customers for my MSP agreements every month. Here's my costs for that. And not just costs of tools, but also the actual costs of labor. So the amount of time your technicians are putting into these tickets, that needs to be factored into that as well. And then at the end, what is my profitability on that agreement? So we see people a lot where they come into the program, and we talk about going after your existing customers, pitching cybersecurity, getting them on board with where they need to be, not where they were with just the support features, because we know where they need to be and what's actually going on out there. And the concern tends to be, well, I can't afford to lose that revenue. So people kind of pull back and get a little bit scared about pitching something new to these existing clients. And then when we take a little bit deeper dive, so one, we usually ask, well, what are you actually making on that client? And a lot of them don't have that information easily at hand. When we boil it down, they're often surprised by they're not going to lose the amount of money that customer is paying them. They're going to be losing a small fraction of that because they're also losing those costs, right? So knowing what the profitability is per agreement is really critical in helping make those business decisions on how you want to move forward. So when we boil it down like that, they look at it and go, oh, well, I've got this, $1,000 a month client. If they got mad at me because I pitched them cybersecurity, I'm really only losing about $100 a month because I'm not making that much money off of them. So it starts giving them that business perspective as well. Like, wait a minute, we're doing tickets all the time. This is a pain in the butt client, and we're only actually making $100 a month off of them, because up until that point they've been thinking we're making $1,000 off of them, and they're not.
That activity might hurt. Like really sitting down and thinking about that, like assessing that profit margin on your clients. That might hurt some feelings.
It's like a eureka moment for a lot of people when they go through and look at that. They're like, I never really did like that client. And now that I'm looking at the numbers, why am I putting myself through this?
Now I know why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that though. I like what you said about you have to think about where you're going to be 5 years from now, and really putting it into perspective that hopefully in 5 years. You're not the one that's handling the tickets, and you are the one that, instead of dealing with these things as they're coming in, you're thinking about where, 5 years from now, I'm thinking about where are we going to be 5 years from now also. So it's like, you're always, as a CEO, you're thinking about, okay, what's the goal of the company? How are we going to set ourselves up for growth? And you hopefully are moving yourself from working, in the business, doing the things all day, taking care of the tickets, etc., and you're working on the business. And so I definitely agree that we want to have the systems and the structure and the tools that are going to help us do that. Yeah. And so that we're not having to like migrate or move or like put our team through more work than what we have to. So
there's so much wasted time that we spend already. And especially being in that situation and being able to look back, hindsight being 2020, like the amount of wasted time, we'll talk about this a little bit later on, the amount of wasted time we took chasing tools, doing things that didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I mean, if you really want to grow, you always need to be making those decisions based on the future and where you're looking to be, and adjusting as necessary as you go. I mean, your vision for 5 years down the road today might be different, than it is next year, depending on how things go. But constantly be making your decisions based on that. So the examples and recommendations for this one, and I've had debates on this particular topic, specifically with the PSA, with a bunch of different people over the years. On one of our tech calls, I think last month or the month before, as I was starting to think and put together the topics for this talk or these talks, I posed the question because I think it was even. I can't remember who it was. So I had a little bit of a debate with somebody, and they're like, no, your stack is going to be different, if you're a smaller MSP versus a more seasoned MSP. And I was like, no, I disagree. And in hindsight, there was definitely some things that we did early on just because we were small to try and save a couple of bucks. But I think if you charge properly from the beginning, which is a problem that most IT organizations have, where they don't do that, If we can get people to charge properly right from the beginning, the tools, you should be able to pick the tools that you need and that are going to keep you in moving along in the future right from the get-go, as opposed to, and I think the PSA is a perfect example of this, trying to find the budget one that's going to get you through right now and then having to move and change. So we posed that question to some of the larger MSPs in seven figure on one of the tech calls. And that was really the consensus was, I wish I would have known that then, because that's exactly what I would have done. I would have started with ConnectWise, or I would have started with Autotask, because they have all of the tools I know that I need today with where my business is today. And the amount of money that I saved at that point really didn't amount to much to get to this point. And again, if you charge properly in the beginning, which most of us don't, so now we're passing that knowledge on to you. Charge properly in the beginning, you can use the tools that you need right from the beginning and not have to switch those things.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, especially with the PSAs, ConnectWise, Manage, and Autotask are probably the gold standards as far as PSAs are in the industry right now. If you're just starting out, you are probably going to be using 1% of what their capabilities are, and that's fine. I would highly recommend with both of them that you invest in a third-party consultant for those, as far as configuring them. Maybe not right out of the gate, like if you're a smaller MSP, but as you go down the road, investing in a third-party consultant to help tweak those tools to get you the information that you want. They're both very capable of doing that. It just takes a little bit of configuration sometimes to get it to give you the information that fits your business model exactly the way that you want it to. Focus Planet right here is an example of one. I know that they work with ConnectWise Manage. I don't have an example specifically for Autotask, but I know several of them exist. There's a lot of good ones out there. And both of those platforms have their own internal consultants. A lot of the feedback I've gotten from people, though, is the third-party consultants almost know these products better, and they're much better at helping you get them to work for your business model, whereas some of the internal consultants that that ConnectWise has, or that Datto Kaseya has, they're going to try and fit you more into the mold of what they want, whereas the third-party consultants are going to help you do things the way that you want to be doing them. So highly recommend that, at least down the road, to make sure that you've got those things tweaked as best you can. So the next one up is the remote monitoring and management, or the RMM tools. So I wanted to start this one off with, is RMM on its way out the door? Because I believe ultimately it is. I think we're using RMM tools less and less than we used to. I mean, they used to be handling the majority of the automation and things that we do with our clients. As an MSP, automation is very, very critical, because the less that we have to have being used as far as man hours are concerned, the more profit that we're able to make, the more we're able to get out of the tools that we have. Because like I said, making sure that you're tracking things like labor that's put into these contracts is really, really important. And I think it's one of those things that a lot of people don't really look at. So they may think that they're making a lot more money on a contract than they actually are, because of those man hours that are being put into it. But something like an RMM is more of a controllable cost. So like the more that we can do automation wise with the tool, the more that we can control those labor costs and really focus and streamline on our business. So RMM, like I said, a lot of times, like 5 years ago, this was kind of the workhorse of our tool stack, and it handled all the automation, scripting, pushing things out, Windows updates, third-party updates. These days, it's being used less and less, especially if you're doing, using a platform like Microsoft 365 and Intune. A lot of that stuff that the RMM used to be doing is now capable of being pushed through Intune. So, Intune can push the Windows updates. It can push a lot of the software application packages that are out there. The way that we had it configured, we were heavily using Intune, and we could ship a computer right to the end client and have them sign in with their username and password, and then all of the scripts and things within Intune would basically push everything out for us. And there was very little hands-on things that we would have to do because of that configuration. So, one of the things that pushed out was the RMM agent. And at the end of the day, our RMM tool was really only handling third-party patching and monitoring. And we didn't even use the built-in remote tool for the RMM, because we used something else that we preferred better. So I think it's important to be ready for the day that the RMM is going to go away. I think Microsoft is doing a really good job of adding a bunch of stuff. They've got their Lighthouse program now, which is starting to pick up a little bit of the slack for RMM. It's still not there yet, but it's something to be prepared for. That's probably a tool that will be a thing of the past here, probably in the next 2 to 5 years. I would suspect.
Actually, someone that commented that said that had made a big difference, that they worked with C-level on their auto task configuration.
And C-level is one that I have heard a lot of good things about, but yeah, can't say enough about third-party consultants for that. I mean, it can be not a cheap endeavor, but it's way worth it. I mean, just the amount of information once I went through that process that I was able to have at my fingertips at the drop of a hat was just super helpful. Whereas some of the KPIs, even though ConnectWise Manage had the capability of doing it, when it wasn't properly configured, it still could take me, an hour or two to pull that information. And that's just a waste of time when you can get it at your fingertips. So it really works out. So yeah, I can't say enough about that. RMM tools, as far as choosing which RMM you're going to use, partly because they're not doing as much as they did before, but also because they've been around so long. I mean, if you look at the feature sets of most of these RMMs out there, almost all of them are pretty much in sync. So this is another good example of, I don't know how much time you really want to spend trying to figure out and pick which one you're going to do. Because at the end of the day, a lot of them pretty much do the same thing. And in a limited capacity, especially if you're using something like Intune already, it's probably not going to move the needle as much. So this would be one where I would say, don't waste a ton of time trying to find the perfect RMM, because they all sort of do the same thing these days. The caveat to that is Automate, I think, is probably the outlier here. So ConnectWise Automate is a super, super powerful tool, very, very customizable. It's one of those tools, though, that really requires a dedicated resource in order to manage and run. So it's not just about doing its thing and sitting there and being automated. You have to have somebody there tuning it and attending to it on a regular basis. Whereas most of the rest of the RMMs that are out there, they may not have as customizable of features, but most of them do really 99% of what you need on a daily basis. So, that's something to think about. We've had a few people who have come in and they're like, hey, I want to use Automate because, Automate's so powerful. I hear all these good things about it. And we usually tell them, hey, do you want to spend, how much time of your day do you want to spend managing your RMM? Or do you want to just put something in that does like 99% of what you need to do pretty much out of the box automatically? So that's typically going to be our recommendation. So looking at some of the RMMs that are out there, I'll put Automate on here as a recommendation, but like I said, I would only use that if you have a specific need for it and have dedicated resources to invest in it. ConnectWise RMM is a good one. Datto RMM, Ninja RMM, those are all solid products. So, make sure that you just choose the one that looks right for you. But, again, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on your RMM tool. They all really do kind of the same thing. So secure remote tool. Most of the RMM tools that are out there do include a remote tool of some sort to connect into your end users' computers and do the maintenance that you need to do. But you don't have to use the one that the RMM includes. For example, at my MSP, we used Screen Connect from way back in the day, and then it became ConnectWise Control because ConnectWise likes to change names of everything. We loved that tool so much. We had trained on it. It was just a solid, reliable tool. So we just kept using that, even though the RMMs that we had over the years all typically included some sort of remote tool. So you don't have to get hung up on those. Remote tools aren't terribly expensive, so it's not like a big extra expenditure at the end of the day to add that to the stack. So ConnectWise Control, I think, is a really good example, a solid tool. Splashtop is another one. I've seen people use everything from TeamViewer to any number of things. So just find the one that works for you. How do you feel about remote tools, Lindsay?
It feels very straightforward. Honestly, it's kind of like what I recommend for whenever we're doing like cold email or even like social media scheduling. It's like, just pick a tool, like just pick something. And then you just if anything's going to work, if you work it. Of course, there are small differences, amongst all tools and platforms, etc. But you just have to pick something. So I don't know if that's what we're going for here, but
in fact, it's a really good segue into the next one. So
Ooh. Okay,
So
then.
and I agree 100%, especially with the support side of things. At the end of the day, just pick something. Some are going to have a little bit more impact than others. Like I said, I would really probably spend a little bit more time on choosing your PSA, but something like your RMM, picking something is better than spending 3 months trying to figure out.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, we don't want to just stay in this place of, oh, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. And that's taken money off the table. Right. Time is money. So the more time that we're spending on it, the more money that we're also spending. So, so Ryan, would you say that PSA is the one that like matters the most?
Of the ones, of everything that we're talking about today, that would be the one that I would probably invest the most time in choosing the right thing. Okay. I mean, from my perspective, I think your top two choices are going to be ConnectWise Manage or Autotask. So, you've at least got the field narrowed down quite a bit, but that's the one I wouldn't just, throw something at a wall and say, okay, this is going to be my PSA.
What are the deciding factors between those?
I think they're both really, really solid. I mean, if you're using, Datto RMM, for example, Autotask is probably a better choice because it's going to have a more direct, natural integration. ConnectWise RMM with ConnectWise Manage, those are going to work better together. Okay. But honestly, I used Datto RMM at one point with ConnectWise Manage. So like most of the integrations that all of these other tools have, Autotask and ConnectWise are almost always included in those integrations. Those are like the first ones that vendor tools choose to integrate with and set up for. So either of those, you're probably in good shape no matter what else you're using.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Thank you.
So documentation. So documentation, I think on one hand falls into this. This is one of the most critical long-term investments for your MSP, but it also falls into the just choose one and do it, right? But you need to be doing some sort of documentation. I don't care at the end of the day what tool you're using or what platform you're using for documentation. But this is like the one thing that we see from people that they say, if I could go back and do something different as I was starting my MSP, it would be building out my documentation from day one. So this is something that can be such a time suck or such a time saver as you get further along with your MSP. Making sure that you have solid documentation helps you with things like, if you were to outsource your help desk, onboarding new employees, making sure that you have solid documentation that they can follow and learn from is super, super critical. You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel and re-troubleshoot and reduplicate issues for every problem that comes along every time it comes along. Spend that time the first time, figure out what the problem is, what the resolution is, document it, and then next time that happens, it takes a fraction of the time. So this is another thing that really plays into your profitability and that labor factor and the services that you provide. So it's the most critical long-term investment for your MSP. And I fell into that category. I wish I did a better job at documentation when I started my MSP because it really caused some extra work down the road as we started doing it, but it definitely helps you scale. It improves the client experience because think about it. It's not just about how much time it takes your tech to figure out and solve that problem and the cost there, but the client the whole time is waiting for them to get that issue resolved. So if you can take that and resolve that issue right off the bat because you've seen it before and you've got it properly documented, it just makes you look really, really good to your clients. And it increases your value to potential buyers because if you have really solid documentation, it really helps in that transitionary period. So this is something I added this last week because I'm going through this right now, right? Having good documentation is really helpful in the valuation of your company because they know that they can take on your customers and they've got that documentation, so they're not kind of starting out blind. They've got a roadmap to properly serve your clients, because just because they're buying your business doesn't mean that they're not in the business of not serving your customers well. Like if they buy your business and they treat your customers poorly or are not able to provide that client satisfaction, those customers are going to leave and then that value is gone. So it's in their best interest to have these things and be able to provide that good support for your clients after that purchase. So something really to consider.
What's the most important thing to document?
Everything. Like literally everything.
Yeah. Well, like, do you mean like legal contracts, SOPs, like what? Like what is like what would you say?
I think from a support perspective, like the solutions and troubleshooting, so like the steps to perform certain tasks. Okay. But I agree, like having documentation for all of your processes, so even as simple as having a documentation on how to build your processes. So a standard operating procedure for building standard operating procedures. That's probably your first one, right? But yeah, I mean, honestly, the answer, I know it's not, what you were looking for, but it's really everything. I mean, you just got to think of it that way. You know, is there documentation for this? Because that was really my problem. It's a good example. Is, you know, to me, you know, I would be like, does this need to be documented? No, this seems obvious. Well, you know, it seemed obvious to me in the moment, but then, you know, there's obviously, you know, somebody else comes along and it's not as obvious to them as it was for you. You're in a different, you know, experience levels and whatnot. And, you know, the number of times I troubleshot something, I was like, oh, I'll remember this. And then, you know, didn't see it again for 6 months. I was like, oh man, I wish I had documentation, because now I got to go through all those troubleshooting steps all over again. So really everything. So examples and recommendations of some of the tools out there. IT Glue is probably the gold standard. Hoodoo is a really, really solid newcomer to the arena. I'd highly recommend taking a look at that. But really, at the end of the day, just find something. You know, if you're putting your documentation in OneNote, SharePoint, you're just, you know, putting it in a Word documents, whatever, you know, make sure that you're doing this and putting it somewhere. You know, you can always put it, you know, in a Word doc and then, you know, include it into IT Glue or Hoodoo down the road if you're not ready to make those investments. So just get the documentation and do it. All right, help desk services and network operations center. So these are kind of the cores of the service offering. And the reason I bring this up, you know, in tools is because there's different ways that MSPs can approach this. I mean, there's the traditional in-house, you know, you've got your techs that are handling all of this stuff, which is a solid approach. But there's some ways that you can do things differently and you know, be better prepared to scale these days too. So, you know, there's a bunch of different outsource options for various pieces. So, you know, things like mission control, outsource help desk and NOC services. These are really, really solid solutions for, you know, specifically taking off like those level 1 type tickets off your plate. So they can take, you know, and these are the tickets that your techs typically don't like doing, you know, the password resets and things like that. If you have somebody, if you're, you know, as your organization matures and you've got enough tickets coming in, if you can take those off your plate with an outsourced service for a fraction of the cost, it just makes sense. You've also got things like Field Nation. So if you've got, and we're seeing this more and more, if you've got an MSP, but you're serving clients across the country or, you know, outside of your normal service area where your techs, your local techs can just drive out and service those, you know, services like Field Nation are really good alternatives because, I mean, think about it. We can probably do 90 to 95% of our work these days completely remote. So you don't necessarily need to have somebody in those areas very often. So something like Field Nation allows you to really broaden your service area and keep those techs where they are, or, you know, it allows you to hire techs fully remote. You know, so you know, my tech was 3 states away because he handled all of the remote stuff. That was 95% of what our work was, and then we were able to use either an outsourced resource or, you know, sometimes I would go out there and handle any of the stuff that we needed to do on site for those users. So Field Nation's a really good option for that. Upwork can also help with that. There's also some really good resources on Upwork that can handle, you know, the other side of it. So maybe like the level 3 or engineering type tickets. So that was another one that, you know, we didn't have a ton of those really, really high end, you know, head scratchers. So does it make sense to hire that premium resource, that engineering level resource, when you can outsource that, you know, the 1 or 2 tickets that you get in over the course of a couple of weeks for something like that? So there's a lot of different ways that you can, you know, shuffle the deck to really be prepared for the different types of service offerings that are out there. So, you know, hybrid would be a mix of those two. And that's probably how I would recommend going about it.
Do you think that like there's a certain place, like, so say for the beginner MSP, like first 5 years of business or first 3 years of business, what would you say is like, what makes sense the most?
So, and I learned this the hard way. I kind of tried a couple of different solutions. In my experience, I would hire my first tech in-house. I would hire probably like a level 2-ish tech for in-house that can handle the majority of stuff. Somebody who is okay doing the level 1 stuff, you know, and I mean, these days with all of the automation, if you've got your stack set up properly, a lot of that level 1 stuff is just as rare as some of the level 3 engineering level stuff. The level 2 is really kind of your bread and butter. So like kind of the interesting troubleshooting type problems. So having a resource that you control, that you train as your first hire, I think is really the way to go. And then you can augment that as you grow with some of those outsourced resources in that hybrid model.
Okay.
That would be how I would design it from the ground up based on my learning through.
Hire in-house for level 1 and level 2, basically, or level 2 that can perform level 1,
Mhm.
and then outsourcing from there rather than
Because that resource, once you've got them trained on your clients and how you do everything in your stack,
Yep.
then they can then facilitate the relationships with those outsourced resources.
Oh, okay. Awesome. And
So
I know several clients that we have that do
Mhm.
this and do it really well. And like
Yep.
it works out for them. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'm thinking of one in particular who has kind of mastered this. So he's got several offshore resources that handle a lot of the back end tech work, and then he has local resources. Local as in within the country, they're still remote for
yeah.
most of the clients that handle the customer facing stuff, because these offshore folks are really solid. Hard workers, good technicians. Unfortunately, some people have issues with accents and different choices and whatnot. So sometimes it's difficult to have those as front facing as we might like, because there's nothing wrong with that at the end of the day. But some people have issues with that. So you can kind of have that nice little mix of things. And so I guess the moral of the story here is there's a bunch of different ways that you can kind of put this together and find a solution that works for your business that can make it really easy to scale. Because if you're just stuck with that one internal resource, and then you get an opportunity for a 250 seat client, you have to be structured properly to be able to go after that and not have to worry about, am I going to be able to hire enough people in time in order to take on this new business? So something like this model really works and scales really well. All right. Email hosting.
Oh, one more thing on that.
Yeah.
Actually, let me plug in from the marketing standpoint on
Okay.
that. Go back to the previous slide.
Mhm.
So I'll just plug this in here. This is a mindset to keep across the board, I would say, with yes, with your tech, but also with other parts of your team, such as your marketing efforts. If you have if you have repetitive tasks or tasks that definitely don't need you to complete them. So for an example, let's say you've got your campaigns, you've ran your webinar campaign 1 or 2 times, at which point you don't have to be the one that continuously resets that up and goes into your CRM and changes those things out. So having this mindset right here of outsourcing and getting creative with that, it doesn't always necessarily mean hiring the in-house tech or hiring the in-house marketing manager or CMO. It can definitely be outsourced, offshores. If you can find someone or even get a referral from someone, it can be someone that's remote, that's not even in your area. So I really like this slide, and I think it's super applicable to other parts of our business where sometimes, yes, and sometimes we just want to keep it so close to us because it's our baby, but it's also that prevents us from scaling and that prevents us from growing. So own the strategy, own it, know it front to back, document the processes, and then always be thinking, okay, but how am I going to scale from here? Where are we going to be again 5 years from now?
Yep.
How are we going to get there? So this is really
you just
good.
tied up like everything that has happened up to this point very nicely.
Yep. You're welcome.
All right, email hosting. This one, I think Microsoft 365 is the pretty obvious gold standard here. This is something that we're really even seeing enterprises moving to. Google Workspace would be another example. This one I think has its place. There's some specialities with this, like we had talked about last week as far as the philosophy of your stack. My recommendation as far as properly scaling and streamlining your operations would be pick one that you're going to train and support. There's plenty of business out there. So if you're a Microsoft 365 shop and somebody comes and they're on Google Workspace and they want to stay there, it's a good fit for them. Have a referral partner that works with Google Workspace and share that prospect with them. And they're typically going to share it vice versa. But it really helps as far as not having to balance 2 platforms. Specifically from a security standpoint, the way that we secure 365 email versus Google Workspace email is kind of a different beast. So making sure that you can focus on the things that you're trained on and you do the best. But I would recommend either one of those 2. What I would definitely do is avoid Exchange and avoid like the traditional POP IMAP email that is provided for free with domain hosting and things like that. These things just aren't good for business anymore. Exchange was built for business, but even Microsoft has come out and said that they're going to start blocking access to emails from out-of-date Exchange servers, because there's just so many vulnerabilities with Microsoft Exchange, on-premises Exchange, and so many companies out there that have not updated. They're running on old servers running Exchange or have these unpatched vulnerabilities. So even within Microsoft's 365 platform, in their own environment, Microsoft is going to be blocking things from Exchange if they're on those old servers. So it's really just a headache on a lot of levels. So avoid Exchange, save yourself the trouble, get your clients over on Microsoft 365 or Google if they're in a Google environment. Backup is really, really important, obviously. The biggest things I would say, there's a ton of different backup providers out there. This was just like, a quick brain dump of the ones that I knew off the top of my head. The thing with the backup providers is evaluate your customers' needs. They're always going to need varying levels of backup. You want to make sure that you've got platforms that can do each one of those. Some clients are going to have a more immediate need where if they have an outage, they need to be back up and running within, minutes to hours. Some of them are going to be a little bit more comfortable where that data is not as critical and they can get by with it. And you have, more like a day or two to restore, and some even further. So just make sure that you're, and I knew I missed one. There's a lot of, we got a comment that I missed Axient. Yes, that's another one out there. There's a ton of them out there. But like I said, the thing to make sure that you're really focusing on is what the client's needs are, making sure you're providing the adequate backup protection for what their recovery needs are, and find one that works for you. I mean, backups was always a challenge for me. We tried a lot of different providers. Some worked better than others. Some were noisier. Some provided better reporting. You want to make sure that when a backup fails, so you can go in and address it. You want to be able to easily do test restores to make sure that these things are working properly. On one hand, you want it to be kind of as set it and forget it as possible, but you also want it to be easy to maintain and manage and be aware of. So that's another thing I think a lot of MSPs forget about or disregard is those test restores to make sure that when the event something bad actually happens, for a fact you're going to be able to restore that data because you've been testing it periodically throughout the process. So a lot of them out there. There's no right or wrong answer with this one. Again, just make sure that you're evaluating properly what the customer's needs are and you've got that in there. SaaS backup. This is one that's more and more important every day with more people moving to platforms like Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, getting away from those on-premise services. Our servers. So making sure one thing that we did, again, we were heavily using Microsoft 365. Most of your average users, they were syncing all of their data with OneDrive. So their desktop, their documents, their pictures were all syncing in the cloud. So really it was more important to make sure that those SaaS backups were in place because then we could have those ready to go. That's where most of their critical data was anyway. The endpoint backups were a little bit less important. We didn't really have as many servers in the environment to worry about. So SaaS backups were a lot bigger of a deal at this point and something that we're going to see more and more of. So make sure you have that stuff backed up. Even Microsoft, look at their terms and conditions. They highly recommend that you have a third-party backup for that software. So the cloud is not a backup.
Oh, say that again. What?
The cloud is not a backup.
Let's put it on a t-shirt.
Right? Well, we got enough t-shirts out there.
Amanda, here's a t-shirt idea. Q3.
There you go. Answering services. I think this is another really critical one that can help you scale, especially if you're just getting started out. That's one of the things that can be difficult if you're a smaller organization, trying to get things done. And then every time you get a phone call, kind of have to stop the works and see what's going on and reassess everything. So having an answering service really, really helps. So we personally use Daybreak Virtual. They were very cool in that they weren't very robotic. Some of the answering services you got to be careful because it's almost like programming a robot. Unless they have a specific script that they can read, they don't deviate very well. Daybreak was great. They spoke very human-like. They were able to think on their feet. They were able to open tickets. So they were able to go into our PSA and open a ticket when a client called. So that was really helpful. I know a lot of them do that. Mission Control, we talked about them for knock and help desk services. They also will do ticket intake. So they'll answer and put tickets into the system as well. Answer Connect is another good example. A lot of people look badly on these types of things and we'll say, hey, no, you need to be answering your own phones. And that's great if you've got the resources to do that. But it's not, so long as you find the right one, I never had a single complaint about our answering service. And I think you got to choose the right one, because if they're not able to answer in a human-like factor, then it's obvious that it's an answering service. That could be detrimental. But there are services out there that can help, and they really help you to scale. So. Microsoft 365 management. I threw this one in there. I think this is a really good one to consider, especially if you're really invested in 365, Intune, Azure Active Directory. That can be a beast to manage, especially if you're not super familiar with it. So having somebody in your corner that can help you with the nuances of it. NetLogic My 365 is a really great example of a consulting service, basically. So they're able to help push out kind of a standard baseline of policies. When they configure a tenant for us, with their system, it took half an hour for them to do it, including like the time where we select the options and everything that we want to roll that out. Whereas if we were to do that manually by hand, it's probably a couple hours easy to configure a tenant. On top of the fact that if something weird happened, which it's Microsoft, so that happens, we had a resource to reach out to and help troubleshoot, as opposed to waiting for Microsoft support to get back to us, which sometimes can be a back and forth that takes a couple of weeks, which is just not acceptable. Simian Cloud's another good example. This is more of an automated tool type solution for this, but again, similar concept where they've got a baseline of policies that you can push out and compare and things like that. SIP is more of a open source kind of solution that I know a lot of people that use. It sounds like a very solid open source solution as well, but something that can help you manage all of those tenants, especially if you're really heavily using 365 for Intune and policies and whatnot. So something that really helps streamline those operations. And then I kind of put together some additional tools that these are more optional type things. I guess the last one also factors into that, but you may or may not find value in some of these depending on what your tool stack looks like, the types of customers that you're serving, the maturity of your company. LionGuard's a really solid platform that has integrations with a lot of different things to really help you kind of keep track. This also plugs into your documentation system. So like a really good example of where this comes in handy, if you've got it plugged into hardware firewall, it can track changes and settings in that hardware firewall and keep that in your documentation. So if something happens down the line, you can go back and see when the last change was. But they've got a lot of different integrations that do things like that. So this is one that gives you a lot of visibility, and those connections to your documentation system really give you that visibility, even kind of going back in time for something that, for a problem that maybe happens after a change, occurred in the past. So that's a really good one. Auvik is another good example. If you needed a little bit more visibility into networks and troubleshooting, this is a really good platform that monitors your networks and changes and things like that on your network platforms. Cloud Radial is a really good one. This is one that we use. Cloud Radial basically provides you with a customized customer portal that they can go to. This was kind of one of the challenges we had with ConnectWise. While ConnectWise does have a customer portal built into the PSA, it doesn't look the greatest. So we needed to find something that looked good, that was more customizable. Cloud Radial does that. So we would do things like we had intake forms for new users being added for our clients, separation forms when somebody got let go that had all of the information that we needed in order to handle those tickets, custom requests where they could just put the ticket in through there, super easy, or some of the more common tickets where we had a password reset, where we're able to get and capture everything that we needed in order to do that. So it's a really cool and customizable portal system. TimeZest is another cool one. Think of this as Calendly for your techs. So it's got an integration. I'll speak to the ConnectWise one because I'm more familiar with that. It's got an integration right in ConnectWise. So, ticket comes in, tech gets the ticket. Instead of chasing somebody around and trying to, catch up with them and leaving messages left and right and playing phone tag, you can send them a TimeZest request where they can schedule, the specific amount of time that's needed for that ticket with the tech. And it just makes it really easy. The amount of time that we spent sometimes chasing around and trying to get a hold of a client was just not worth it. So this really speeds that kind of thing up. Thread is another really cool one. I highly recommend you check this out. It's kind of a new way of thinking of and handling kind of that customer back and forth with the ticket. So they've got a bunch of different tools to allow the customers to text and have it go right into the ticket. Just a really cool way of kind of flipping the whole boring, antiquated ticket system on its head and making something that's a little bit more easy for your customers and your technicians to communicate while still capturing all of that data into your ticketing system. Some staff tracking services. So these are some things that you can either use internally or even provide for your customers. Active Track is probably the most popular one, most well-known one. Zorus is a really solid alternative as well. They look at things a little bit differently. I really like how Zorus looks at the staff tracking, so I would really give them a call as well. Active Track is still just a good solid solution, and especially with people working remotely, these types of solutions are a little bit more popular these days than they were in the past. So a lot of customers who are looking for this type of solution for keeping track of their remote users. Voice over IP services is another one that is a really good value add. Citricom and OIT VoIP are two really good examples of this. These are solutions that really can also help keep you sticky, whether or not you just provide them as part of your overall service or use them as a third-party vendor add-on service kind of thing. But VoIP is a really good one to look at as well. So that's a lot of the support stuff that we do. Again, I think this is the easy stuff. There's a lot of different options there. But at the end of the day, just remember that there's no perfect stack. Don't waste a ton of time with a lot of these things. I think the PSA being the only exclusion to that. Most of these things, it's not going to be the end of the world if you choose a tool and it's not the best fit. Just make sure that you look and reevaluate next year, but just pick something, have something, find what suits your needs, find what suits your workflows and your values. And then be careful about how much time you spend evaluating tools. This is something we talked a little bit about last week as well. The amount of time I see MSPs spend evaluating tools, if you were to associate a cost with that, like an hourly cost to your time, the amount of time tool research costs you would probably blow your mind. So try, and we have the whole technician chasing squirrel kind of mentality. Ooh, a new tool, I got to find out more about it. Rein yourself in, evaluate your tools as your commitments are coming up. So if you're using an RMM, you're not super happy with it, you're thinking about switching, don't look at every RMM that's out there throughout the course of that year. Wait until you got about 3 months left before your commitment for that one you're using now is up, and then use that as your window to evaluate. Same thing with any other tool. Just don't be looking at things all year long, because the amount of time you're going to waste just looking at tools is really, really scary. It's like anything else with time. You've got to make sure that you're associating a cost with your time. And I think that's something that a lot of newer owners fail to realize. Hey, I'm just going to bootstrap this, and there's a cost associated with your time. So find the best use of that. Be flexible, prioritize, change when necessary. Again, a lot of these tools, specifically the support stack, there's not a whole lot of difference between one RMM and another. Make sure if you're changing, it's not just for the sake of change, that you actually have a reason for that. Evaluate things in that respect. And so that's it for the support stack. Like I said, next week is going to be the season finale, the stuff you've all been waiting for, the security stack. So make sure you are available next week, same time, same place, and we'll be going through that security stack. That one should be fun. I'm looking forward to the comments on that one. So here it goes.
This was so good, Ryan. I think you did a really great job going through those and saying, hey, here's what you need to know. Here's what's not super important. And let's just move forward from it. I think this is also what's really cool about our community is that if you have a question or you want to get like real feedback from each other, ask someone in the group, talk about these things, and then make a decision and move forward. So this was really good. Thank you, Ryan. I feel like I learned a few things throughout this as well. We should have added ChatGPT on the additional section.
Yep. I haven't messed around with that as much yet, because I knew I was going to go down a rabbit hole. So I'm kind of eating my own dog food and not chasing that until I've got actual time to play around with it.
I know. Oh my gosh, you're so good, Ryan. Wow. All right, guys. Thank you all so much for tuning in. You see here we've got our sign up for our live event. So pre-day is all about CSRAs. It's with we actually have Talibi on that pre-day, right?
Talibi and me. Yep. So we're running the show. Yeah.
Okay. So Ryan's going to be running the show.
I got a big homework assignment for that one.
Oh yeah. Have fun with that. That was me last quarter. Wow. So have fun with that, Ryan. So guys, go ahead, check this out. If you have questions about our live event, reach out to us, ask us. You've got myself, you can ask Ryan. Chris is pretty accessible. You can ask him. Nora in the group. So reach out to us if you're not sure if this is for you or if you need to join us live or not. Let's talk about it. Let's get your questions answered. Pre-day happens on that Tuesday. And then we have, which is usually a smaller group on that Tuesday. It's small groups, lots of
Oh,
interaction.
last event, it was almost as big as the main event. Like
Yeah,
we had a lot of people there for pre-day.
Yeah, that's true. And then day 1 actually starts on that Wednesday, and then day 2 is on Thursday. So it's going to be good stuff. I hear that Chris is going to do the watermelon crawl, the honky tonk. I'm literally just signing him up for this. So he's going to kill me. But
that's worth
all
the
right.
price of admission.
Yes, exactly. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ryan. And we will see you all back next week to get a view into Ryan's cybersecurity stack recommendations.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
All right. Bye, everyone.